So we are going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Aloni with Schneps Media. We're here for a very important webinar, Protect Your Loved Ones from Social Media Scams. Schneps Media is the largest local media company in the New York metro area with over 100 publications across Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn, the Bronx, Long Island, the East End, Philadelphia, and Palm Beach, Florida. We are thrilled to be working with AARP New York to bring you this very important webinar because social media scams really are rampant and they're scary. And so now we have experts with us today that can talk about what social media scams look like, how to be safer online, how to avoid scams, and how to access free support when you're affected by these scams. So I'm thrilled to have two experts, and I want to introduce them to you now. First, please welcome Kat Fisher. Kat Fisher has been the AARP Associate Director of Community Engagement for Upstate New York since 2018. Kat works with members, volunteers, and staff on issues important to the 50-plus population and AARP's 2.2 million New York members and their families. Kat has led successful AARP campaigns in New York State on fraud and scams and has developed many local and virtual programs for AARP members and guests. Before joining AARP, Kat worked as an educator and advocate, leading campaigns and organizing communities for several nonprofit organizations. Welcome, Kat.
Thank you.
Wonderful to have you. Now, please welcome Jessica Mates. Jessica is the Deputy Director of Intergovernmental Affairs at the Office of New York State Attorney General Letitia James. Prior to this role, Jessica served as the Chief of Staff to former Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer. Jessica has also founded and helped run a New York City high school, food and finance high school, and has had numerous roles in youth development organizations. At the Attorney General's office, Jessica focuses primarily on Manhattan and Staten Island. She frequently conducts smart senior workshops. Jessica is also a proud grandmother to 3 beautiful granddaughters. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Wonderful to have you here. So we're going to get started with this very important presentation. I want to get started with asking you, Jessica, what's the anatomy of a scam? What makes it a scam?
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And I just want to start out by just thanking Schneps Media and AARP for doing this really important webinar. At the Attorney General's office, we work very hard to protect New Yorkers against scams. It's very prevalent. You're going to hear more information about how much money gets lost every year by people throughout New York State. And so the Attorney General is very concerned about protecting seniors and protecting against scams. What we have found is that scams of all kinds, and we're going to talk about the different scams and how people use social media, but that scams really have a structure to them, no matter what kind of scam it is. And there's three components we found of a scam. The first is that there's a hook. There's something that draws you in and makes you pay attention, right? And with a scam, the ultimate goal, right, is that someone wants your money. I mean, let's be clear. That's what a scam is. You can have a lot of money or you can have a little bit of money. Doesn't matter. Someone out there, some scam artist wants your money. So usually there's a hook, right? There's something that makes you pay attention. Now, this can be a positive hook, like, oh, you've just won some money, or you can get some money. Here's a way that you can earn some money. Here's something out there that's just such an incredibly good bargain, a good deal. It's something that makes you pay attention. Wow, I could get money, I could save money. Or the other type of hook is a negative hook, right? That scares you. If you don't do this, you could lose money. Someone's trying to, your bank account's in jeopardy. You could lose your insurance. Something that scares you and says, oh, wait, I need to pay attention to this because something bad could happen. So hooks can be positive or negative, but there's something that draws you in and makes you pay attention. That's the first part of a scam. The second part of a scam is that there's some con artists involved, right? Obviously, but it's someone who seems trustworthy. It's someone who sounds like they're a friend or a neighbor, and they may have gotten some information about you, maybe through your social media account, and so they can say something personal about you. Oh, we know you had a great trip last month, and now we want to offer you some deal. So it's someone who sounds like they know you, sounds like that you can trust them. And the third part of a scam, and this is really important to remember, the third part is there's almost always a deadline. There's someone saying to you, you need to do this right now. Right now, you need to send money, you need to click on this link, you need to go to this website. No time, you can't think about it, don't call around. We need you to do this thing right now. And if anyone on social media or on the phone or anywhere tells you that you need to do something that involves your money or your personal information, your bank account, anything about you, step back, because there should never be a deadline when your money's involved. So if anyone says right now, needs to be, within the hour, that is a very good indication that it's a scam. So we always advise people there's those three things. There's a hook, something that makes you pay attention. There's a person who you feel like for some reason you can trust. And there's a deadline, someone saying, do this right now. And those are the ways that people can get at your personal information and often at your money as well.
Thank you. Those are really important things to look out for. What is happening on social media? Like, how are the bad guys using it to scam people?
So that's a really good question. It used to be that when people wanted to scam you, they might show up at your door, which sometimes they still do. It might be that they call you, which sometimes they still do. But more and more frequently, people are using the internet, they're using email, and now they're using social media. So you might be scrolling through your account, your Facebook account or Instagram, and suddenly these scams pop up. There's an offer of something. There's someone telling you that you want a sweepstake. There's a fake message from someone. So more and more frequently, people are using social media to get to you, to reach you, to find you. So, a lot of the scams that we talk about, and there are a lot of them, there's scams around sweepstakes, and we have the very famous grandparent scam that I'm going to talk about. But these scams more and more frequently happen on social media. So the other thing what I want to just be really clear on social media, just as some very basic tools, and I think people probably know this, but it always bears repeating. You should never accept a friend request from anyone you don't know. And it might sound like a really interesting person, or it might sound like they have something in common with you or some connection to you, but if you don't personally know them, you should never accept a friend request from someone you don't know. And the second thing that happens really often right now, and this is happening on Facebook a lot, is that you are friends with someone, but then you get a request to be friends with them. And so I know what I always think is, oh, they must have opened a new account or something happened and I need to friend them again. Don't ever do that, because it's someone who has somehow accessed your actual friend's account, but now is using it and duplicating it, inviting you to be friends with them. And if you become a duplicate friend, then you're going to actually have fallen for a scam and be open to them getting a lot of your personal information. So the trick is always, and in any scam this is true, do a little research. If you're friends with someone and you get a duplicate friend request, just call them up. Did you send me this? Is this from you? If you have any reason to doubt that it's actually your friend, please call and just do a little background research.
That's really great advice. Really great. Even when someone friends you and you don't know them, even if they have people that you know that they're friends with, don't trust it. Because sometimes your friends were taken and they weren't on this webinar and they didn't get this advice and they could have friended them. So I think, it's like you really have to, you can't just assume because they're friends with your friends, they're safe.
Exactly. And scammers are very clever, so they use all kinds of information to get to you. And what's really scary these days, and I just have to put it out there, is that we have this thing called artificial intelligence, right? AI. And what's happening now is that people are able to duplicate voices, and that's a scary thing, right? Because you get a phone call and it sounds like someone you know. that, you know, and it might not actually be that person. That's scary. So again, the way to protect yourself always is to not react quickly, to take your time, step back, make another phone call. You get a phone call that seems suspicious to you, hang up, and you proactively call the person on the phone number that you have for them. Don't wait, you know, have the incoming call. You hang up and you make the phone call. So you know, there's definitely ways to protect yourself, but we want people to be vigilant and to really be careful.
Really critical advice. I know with my family, we have like a password that is, you know, nothing that anyone would guess, but just to know that who it is, you know that that's your family. But that's great advice, just to hang up the phone and call. Really good. Thank you for that. You know, I'm going to share, Pat has a fantastic presentation that I'm going to share now that we're going to walk through. So I'm going to share that. Really important info.
Great. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And thank you also to Jessica. So my name's Kathleen Fisher. I'm the Associate State Director of Community Engagement for AARP New York, and I'm also the state lead on fraud prevention for AARP's Fraud Watch Network. So I look forward to today's conversation with everyone about how we can heighten everyone's awareness about different kinds of scams and how to prevent fraud, but also how to support those who have been impacted, and also to change the conversation to all of our benefit. So AARP also has a 3-word reminder to stop, think, and verify. So we'll be getting into a little bit more about what that means. So the next slide, please. We first want to let everyone know that we know that fraud and scams are very pervasive, but we wanted to check in and ask you to find the chat. The chat's going just to us, the speakers, but we're going to ask you to weigh in here. How many of you think you have been approached with a fraudulent offer? So how many of you know someone who has been a victim of identity theft or fraud, or you yourself has been approached? So we're just going to see if it's really in your area, if it's hit you. And what we usually find with this is absolutely it's everywhere. It's coming at us from all directions. So thanks for weighing in. If not you, then sometimes it's happened to someone else that you know, friend, family, colleague, neighbor, and maybe you've seen it, but you haven't actually been stolen from. So that's AARP's experience. So next slide, please. We're seeing a lot of people write in saying, yes, absolutely, they've seen it as well. So this chart is very important. Just look at these statistics. The FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, collects consumer reports on fraud. They pin losses at $8.8 billion. That was in 2022. And if you can see this image, take a look at the graph on the right. It shows an increase of nearly $3 billion in 1 year. And that's just what's being reported. $2.7 billion was stolen from 2021 to 2023 online through social media scams. The FBI also reports on online fraud, and they saw losses of $10.3 billion in 2022 just in cybercrime alone. So we know that this is the golden goose for a lot of scammers and fraudsters, this online opportunity. And AARP co-sponsors an annual survey of identity fraud with Javelin Strategy and Research, and their consumer survey from 2022 uncovered $43 billion in just identity fraud alone, people stealing your identity and pretending to be you.
That's outrageous. I mean, these are just staggering. So, you know, you can understand why you can be caught by this. And this is why it's so important to arm yourself with this information.
Great. So next slide. So you might be wondering, like, why is AARP involved? What's the impact of fraud on older adults? Well, consider the impact it has had on you and those in your social circles. And that should give you a good indication. We know, next slide, please. We know through our consumer outreach work and on our own research that most people believe that scams really only happen to older adults. The reality is that younger adults report losing money to fraud more than older adults do. A reminder that scammers know no bounds and target anyone. But while younger people are scammed more frequently, more money is lost by older adults who clearly have more money to lose. Next slide, please. Okay, so now that we've talked about the bigger picture, let's discuss some of the more frequently reported scams. Next slide. So some of the scams you'll see here should be familiar. Imposter scams are exactly what they sound like. Criminals pose as someone or something else to try to convince you to send them money. Government and business imposter scams are the most common. Specific examples of each are noted on the screen. Whenever someone misrepresents themselves, it falls into this category, and social media is rife with fake profiles, fake businesses, and investment opportunities. Social media scams often peddle no-show clothing or electronics that you order and never receive, making undelivered goods online a major type of the kinds of fraud that we're seeing. Next slide. So many of these government and business scams involve threats such as your Social Security has been suspended, you owe back taxes and will face immediate arrest. You have a virus on your computer, your electric bill is past due, and you'll face shut off of your electricity, all if you don't act now. You should know that government and business don't contact you out of the blue about a supposed problem. If you would like to verify whether a business, utility, or government service is trying to contact you, use the customer service numbers or email addresses to contact them yourself. And know that this isn't how government or private companies work. If you are contacted by an imposter, share no sensitive personal information and do not make payments in any form. Jessica, do you have anything to add on this?
Yes, I mean, I just want to really reiterate that often people will say that you need to just basic thing, just give us your routing number, just give us something so that we can get into your account, or maybe you have it's a computer problem and they say just let us get into your computers, we can fix it. Never do that. Just never do that. There's numbers that you can call to verify. Microsoft, call the number that you find that you have for Microsoft and say, did you contact me? Is there a problem? Don't ever just respond to someone who's calling you.
And you also
Thank
have to be careful when you look for a number, because I've had experience where I've Googled the number to a business and it was the wrong number and I ended up calling scammers. So you have to really make sure that when you're grabbing the number off Google, it's the legitimate website, not, an imposter hoping you're going to Google it.
Exactly.
Right. And there's a few things to look for in that, and just a couple tips on that. One is that, when you get a list of agencies, the first few ones will say sponsored. And so you don't want to go to those. Those are not legit, right? You want to go down to an actual a business and see if they have a website and see if it's a legitimate website. The other thing is just to be real careful about names, because usually what happens is someone's pretending they're a business, they'll change like one letter, and I always say, like, Microsoft, you might have something that says Microsoft and instead of a T at the end, it has a P at the end. And you don't really notice it. You're looking fast, you're upset, you think there's a problem, but really look at the name, because often imposters will have just one letter different in their name or their website.
And
Thank
if
you.
someone suspects that they've encountered a scammer, but they're unsure, what can they do?
Well, one thing that they can do, Elizabeth, is AARP staffs a Fraud Watch Network helpline, and that is open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. It's a toll-free call, and I'll give that phone number now. Maybe you can put it in the chat. The Fraud Watch Network helpline is 877-908-3360. And you can, if you suspect you may be encountering a scam, you can use that number and they can counsel you more. But we definitely do want to reiterate that if you have experienced a loss and you know that your information was breached, do report that to authorities. So we do always recommend if you know you've been scammed or defrauded, to report it to law enforcement. But we have a great helpline with trained experts who can discuss what you're seeing or experiencing with you, and who can make recommendations about where and how to report. So that's really important. So the Fraud Watch Network helpline run by AARP can be reached at 877-908-3360. And that's available to people Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
And I will share that in the email as well that everyone is going to get
Wonderful.
after this webinar too. So you'll have it there as well.
Sounds great. So how about going to the next slide? Thank you. So identity theft occurs when someone obtains another person's personal information, social security number, address, birth date, or bank account info, and uses it to commit fraud in your name or other illicit purposes. Some things you can do to protect yourself. You can freeze your credit. So look at annualcreditreport.com for information on how to do so with all three agencies. AARP also has resources on this. So if you wanted to look up how to freeze your credit, you can type in AARP freeze your credit. And you really need to do this with all three agencies. So you can find those directions online. You can also set unique passwords or look into using a password manager app, such as Dashlane, FastPass, or Bitwarden. These are really important because whenever we try to create new passwords for ourselves, oftentimes we find that there's a temptation to make some notes, leave them on your computer. I mean, I found that my parents had sticky notes right on their desktop computer with all their passwords, but you know, they had housekeepers coming in to the house, repair people, grandchildren who may or may not be trustworthy. So these kinds of password protection agencies really do a good job of keeping it locked down and secure. You can also set up electronic access to your bank accounts, which may seem counterintuitive, but at least you can beat the criminal who might take over your accounts online to it. We also recommend that people keep all of their electric device systems up to date by installing all the updates. These often include new security updates, which are really important. Also visit identitytheft.gov to report fraud and find out how to create a plan for recovery. Next slide.
I just want to jump in for a second on passwords. It's real important to have different passwords. And it's very tempting to use the same ones because then you remember them and you don't even have to write them down. But the fact is, if you use the same password for your Facebook account as for your bank account or for your, Google, your computer accounts, all a criminal has to do is get it once and they have access to everything. So it's real important to use different passwords for everything that you use. And the other tip, and I have to say this as a grandmother, you always want to do something easy like the names of your grandchildren as great passwords, right? And I know I'm always very tempted to do that. But, people can find those names often, sometimes through your social media accounts. So it's better to not use those types of passwords like a grandchild's name. Or if you do, don't just use it. Add a bunch of numbers or characters or letters to it, scramble it, something to make it a little bit harder for those who are really trying to figure out what your password is.
That's right. We know now that there are actual digital tools that glean birth dates and relationship status, family members' names, details about your habits that go through all your Facebook and all your online presence to look for those details and store it. So that information is being mined in a number of ways. And the same thing is true with LinkedIn. People can impersonate you based on your professional profile as well. So it's really important to make sure that you're aware of what your online presence is and that you keep those passwords safe. Next slide. Okay, so how we react to fraud. The good news is that we can all be part of the solution. As a society, we can begin reframing how we react to and discuss fraud. So you may never have thought about this before, but from our research, we confirmed that we do treat crime victims differently depending on the crime. We may not even use the word crime when talking about many kinds of scams and fraud, but whenever you lose money or theft occurs in your name, it is a criminal act. With violent and property crimes, we feel empathy for the victim, whether someone got held up on the street at gunpoint or their home was broken into, Of course we do. And the crime and the criminal are scary to us. But when it's a scam or a fraud, a financial crime, we don't think the criminal or the crime, we don't think of the criminal or the crime first. We tend to lay blame at the feet of the victims. If we do think about the criminal, we often use positive words, cunning, shrewd, crafty. So a lot of the things we hear people say, you got duped by that? That's the oldest trick in the book. Or how could he fall for that? Or you'd have to be an idiot. Or how much money did you give them? So this needs to change. So in AARP, we're really encouraging people to look at the language we're using when we talk about fraud and be part of the solution. Next slide.
Jessica, I see you nodding. Did you want to share something about that? Because it really is such a powerful thing that we think about this differently so people aren't ashamed and they can ask for help.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And the other thing that we always say in our publications is to be a good friend, right? So when you are worried about a scam, or you think that a friend of yours might have fallen for something, to talk about it, to share the resources that you have. Don't be embarrassed by it. Don't think it's something you can't talk about. Don't think your friend might be embarrassed. You really need to share information, and you need to be a good and supportive friend so that everyone can report these scams and not feel ashamed, and get the proper law enforcement involved when necessary.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we know that scams are underreported, often because scam victims blame themselves or feel the kind of shame Jessica mentioned. They're filled with embarrassment. I can't believe I fell for this, or how could I be so stupid? And if it's an online dating scam, there might, in addition, be some embarrassment about the fact that you were even using online dating and that someone was able to fool you. But the goal, next slide, please. The goal of the scammer we want people to be aware of in scam operations is to get the target they're trying to scam into a heightened emotional state. So this is really important. What scammers themselves have referred to as getting them under the ether. Tactics for getting someone under the ether include instilling fear or even excitement or even romantic love. They can even exploit our love for our families, like we see in the grandparents scam. Once in an emotional state, it's very hard to access the logical thinking that we normally have access to. And it's there in that emotional state that the scammers succeed. The criminal is using our own thought processes and emotions against us. They're using that adrenaline that's coursing through us, telling us we have to act. And these schemes are sophisticated and nefarious. And the way our brains work when we're in an emotional state takes over and makes us all susceptible. Next slide. So there are some weapons of persuasion used by criminals that it can help to be aware of. Criminals work to gain your trust. So this is something that Jessica referred to earlier. Criminals work to gain your trust, and they know if they can gain your trust, their scam will work. If they can't, it will fail. So they really work hard to build source credibility. So this could be using photos, licenses, fake licenses, a certain kind of background that makes them look legitimate. Let's say a mahogany desk that makes them look like they're a successful business person in an office environment, or even surrounding themselves in the background or in person with other employees that supposedly will legitimize them. They also can pose as a reputable authority or even a celebrity. Now with AI, people are cloning celebrities. And this exploits your deference and respect for authority or your admiration for a celebrity. A criminal also searches for your weaknesses and looks for that Achilles heel, and we all have different ones. So they might spend some time with you to find that. Examples include if you're having some kind of financial stress, or your relationship is on the rocks, or you feel lonely, or you're isolated and you just want to talk to someone, you might be willing to share more information. You might have just lost a job, or you might have a sick loved one. They ask questions to find out, and everyone likes being listened to. And little do they know that these scammers are keeping notes about this stuff that they plan to use for nefarious purposes. They can also scour your social media for details you've already posted online. They can scour your dating profile for details about your religion and your other preferences, your political party, your age. Another thing that is a red flag are when people offer to do favors for you, such as, well, they'll waive this fee. It's building a sense of rapport with you, making you think that you're special in some way, that they're treating you special by waiving a fee or making an exception that's just for you. Another thing that we see when we hear these stories are a fraudster who will shift tactics suddenly. So first, you might hear that you're going to jail because of an unpaid utility bill or something. But once you protest and say, no, 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 I just paid last month, I've got my bill right here, then they'll shift. And all of a sudden you become the innocent victim and they'll try to help you. So when their first tactic moves of threatening you, they will, when it fails, then they'll switch to another tactic. So that's a red flag there, is like, wait a minute, first I'm going to jail, now I'm an innocent victim and they want to help me. So that's something to look out for as well.
Wow.
Just to jump in quickly, also, on the past, I know a lot of times we've used caller IDs to try to figure out if it's a legitimate call. And we just have to urge you not to do that anymore, because in the past you might have seen a New York area code, or maybe even the same exchange as the neighborhood that you're in. A lot of people have that exchange. Or maybe it's a, Washington, D.C. number. Doesn't matter. Scammers have access to all these phone numbers. So, do not rely on caller ID anymore. It's very likely it could be a scammer, even though it looks like a number that seems legitimate.
That's right. That's right. So let's see here.
The illusion of invincibility.
Right. Just one second here. So once people are under the ether and they've built up that trust that we just talked about, they have this, they have you in an emotional state. And when we blame the victim, we ignore that what occurred to them was a crime, often a sophisticated and complicated one. Many think it'll be easy to spot a crime or a scam or an episode of fraud. And so it'll never happen to us. We think that we're invincible. We say things like, oh, the victim didn't know better, but I'm wise to that, or like that would never happen to me, or she really let her guard down. Or if the victim is an older adult, oh, they weren't tech savvy, so they didn't know what they were doing online, or he was probably suffering from cognitive decline. The undercurrent of all that is actually ageism, as if it can only happen to older people who are sitting ducks. AARP challenges you to put the onus on the criminal who has developed sophisticated techniques and hired teams of people who work all day to manipulate their prey and commit their crime. Next slide. What if we flip the narrative and change how we think about fraud? So next slide, please. We use words that show empathy for the victim's plight and that could serve to empower them to want to report. We ask people to avoid words that imply that the victim is at fault, words that inspire shame. So words like duped, swindled, and tricked, these words inspire shame, and let's take them out of our vocabulary. We're going to talk a little bit now about, next slide, about what kind of language builds support. So take a look at this. When someone says, what were you thinking? Look at this statement. Does what were you thinking support or blame the victim? Feel free to put your thoughts in the chat. Next slide. If you said it supports the victim, that's incorrect. It does not support the person. Fraud criminals have a playbook. They work to make the person emotional because they know it's hard to think logically in that state. The fear or enchantment blocks our logical and critical thought process. Instead, we encourage people to place the blame on the criminal alone. We can say instead something like, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Next slide. Okay, next, you are a crime victim. Let's report this to law enforcement. Does this support or blame the victim? Go ahead and throw your thoughts in the chat. If you said support, you're correct. It does support the victim. A lot of people don't know that fraud is a crime. Instead, you might offer to help them report this crime to law enforcement or the Federal Trade Commission, or refer them to AARP's Fraud Watch Network helpline. And we'll just repeat that number again, 877-908-3360. Next slide. What about this one? Why did you answer the phone? Does this question support or blame the victim? Next slide. If you said support, you are incorrect. It blames the victim, and they simply answered the phone. Instead, say you're sorry it happened to them, get more details, and offer to help them report this crime and direct them to trusted sources of help. Next slide. Okay, these are outcomes that AARP believes we could see if we succeed together in reframing fraud and scams this way. Fraud victims receive empathy and respect rather than the scorn and humiliation of the community and their friends. Instead of crumbling from humiliation, they will get angry and take action, and more of these crimes will be reported. Families won't see their victim parent as a fool and will thus protect the relationship. Police may be more inclined to take a complaint, even pursue the case, rather than just claim it's a civil matter. Prosecutors might respect the impact of financial crime on older adults and might take on more cases. Policymakers might get that fraud victims aren't stupid or addled and that they do more to address the scourge, maybe even find a means of restitution. And billions of dollars would stay in our economy instead of in the pockets of transnational criminal organizers. Jessica, do you have anything to add there?
Sorry. Yes, just to reiterate, I mean, it's always good to report it. And I know there's been a few questions in the chat around, a particular thing that happened. And, just to reiterate, it's always good to check it out. It doesn't hurt, and AARP has wonderful resources. At the end, I'll give some of the resources that the Attorney General's office has as well. But we just always encourage people to report things, even if you're not sure. Because, if you're not sure, that's okay. There's people out there who can investigate, who can help you navigate it, and then who can actually bring criminal charges if it is actually a criminal activity. So just really reiterating, please report, even if you're not sure. If you just have a question, fine to use hotlines.
That's right. And reporting also helps law enforcement to track new trends that are emerging. So it's always good to let them know.
You can feel very much like, what's the point? But I think, you really make what the point is. I think sometimes you could feel like, oh, how are they ever going to be caught? But if we all take that approach, they won't be caught. So we need to show our, what we do around this.
That's right, Elizabeth. All right, next slide. Let's talk about prevention strategies. Now that we've discussed top scams and why it's important to change how we talk about fraud, let's look at what you can do to spot and avoid scams. Next slide. Here are some additional ideas and resources. Only share your social security number and other sensitive information with those you know and trust and who need it for a specific reason. Don't share this information with someone who contacts you out of the blue. Shred your sensitive documents. I know we hear about the data breaches where our sensitive information is exposed online, but there are still dumpster divers out there looking for account statements and the like to commit identity fraud. And AARP offers about more than 30 free shredding events around the state to help you shred those documents for free. Also, review your financial statements carefully to stay on top of what's happening in your own account. Contact your creditors if a bill doesn't arrive when expected or includes changes that you don't recognize, and consider banking with your financial institution online or with their app if they have one. This way you can look at your transactions whenever you want. You can also set up alerts to notify you every time there's a withdrawal. You might want to consider placing a free fraud alert on your credit reports. This makes a requirement that a lender must verify your identity before it issues you any new credit in your name. Again, that's placing a free fraud alert on your credit reports. Simply contact one of the 3 major reporting agencies, which are TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax, and request a fraud alert, and that agency will communicate it to the other 2. The fraud alert will expire after 1 year, at which time you can renew if you wish. Another option is to consider a credit freeze. A freeze restricts access to your credit report, which means that you or others won't be able to open a new credit account while the freeze is in place. So if your identity was just stolen, this is an important thing to consider. You can temporarily lift that kind of freeze if you need to, and AARP has all the details about how you can do that. Setting up a free credit freeze is different from a fraud alert, as you'll need to contact each of the 3 credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Everyone is entitled to get 1 free credit report each year from each credit bureau. So to get your free report, you can go to annualcreditreport.com, or you can call 1-877-322-8228. Next slide. Okay, here's some additional resources. Whoops, sorry about that. Where are we here? Okay.
Have the information.
Anything from you, Jessica, while I figure out where we are here?
What about once people have reported to the authorities? Is there anything else that can be done to help them kind of recover from the experience? Jessica?
Yes,
so-
yes. Oh, sorry, Jessica.
No, go ahead. I think that's more an AARP question. I mean, for the
Yeah.
Attorney General's office, we're more, enforcement, law enforcement. So we want you to report things. We want to follow up. We want to go after any criminal activity. But I think AARP probably offers more of the support.
These are great numbers and great websites to make sure you take these down, and that, you take some time in your day. You've taken this great time to be here at this webinar. Take some time in your day afterwards and make sure that you're getting your annual credit report, that you're, putting in, I'm making notes myself, about the free fraud alert, and, make sure that you follow up with this. This is the first step being here. Now use all these resources.
Yeah, excellent. And we could go on to the next slide. Some additional ways to protect yourself: keep your device's operating system updated, because often those updates include new software that goes for your device's security, such as a firewall, antivirus, or anti-malware. Make sure you're running these programs and keeping them current. Also, protect your passwords. Don't share them with anyone. Don't leave them out and open. If you put them in your wallet, and as soon as you leave your handbook or wallet somewhere, you're at risk. Next slide. So AARP Fraud Watch Network is a great resource to keep up on the latest scams. This is really good. We always say, if you can spot it, you can stop it. So I had a girlfriend lose $15,000. It was 2 credit cards for $7,500. She had never heard about the gift card scam. But if you sign up for AARP's Fraud Watch Network for news and information, you can get bi-weekly scam alerts that teach you different kinds of scams. So if it happens to come across your path, you can be aware that, oh wait, I think I've heard of this before. I'm not going to believe this. So we also have a wonderful hit podcast called The Perfect Scam. It's an award-winning show that takes you into the inner workings of scams and how they work. So if you want to report a scam, find out if something is real or fake, or for help if you or a loved one have fallen victim to a scam, we invite you to call the AARP Fraud Watch Network helpline, which is free, where you can connect with trained fraud specialists. And that number again is 877-908-3360. You don't have to be a member of AARP or any certain age to use that information. So next slide. Now that we've discussed top scams and why it's important to change how we talk about fraud, let's take a look at what you can do to spot and avoid them. In addition to the Fraud Watch Network and Volunteers of America, AARP with Volunteers of America has created a program to help you in case you have experienced fraud. It's called REST, which stands for Resilience, Strength, and Time. The program is designed to address the emotional impact of your experience, because often it's even more devastating emotionally than financially. We offer free facilitated peer discussion groups that seek to provide emotional support for you and others in similar situations. There are some people who are afraid to tell family and friends about what happened for fear that they'll start to doubt their judgment. But this is a safe environment. It's empowering and supportive, and it helps people to lower their stress rate and provides attendees with a safe space to talk about the emotional impact of fraud victimization. The sessions help attendees to realize that they're not alone and that this is not their fault. These 1-hour free virtual sessions happen on Zoom every day of the week. They're open to anyone across the country of any age to speak about their own experience. And it can help lower stress. It can allow people to feel safe, like they're not alone, and to deal with the concerns of embarrassment or criticism. And it helps them connect to other victims or loved ones of victims who can help, which all can help reduce their isolation and help participants realize that there are others going through similar situations. Visit aarp.org/fraud support to learn more and register securely. Again, it's aarp.org/fraud support. Next slide. HeyPeers.com also hosts ongoing AARP meetings about fraud where you can receive information and support. Next slide. We hope you've learned some good information today about the kinds of scams going on and how you can protect yourself. We reviewed some trends in scams and fraud, talked about the changing the narrative and why our language and words matter. We discussed common persuasion tactics that scammers use, and we provided some tips and resources so you can protect yourself from fraud and scams. I want to remind you that AARP has so many more resources that you can turn to for information about all different types of fraud. So go to the AARP's Fraud Watch Network website, which is continually updated with new information. You can sign up for AARP's Watchdog Alerts, which are biweekly texts or emails that come in to stay aware of the latest scams. And don't forget that AARP is local as well, offering meaningful connections and enriching experiences close to home. So to visit and learn more about what's happening near you, you can visit aarp.org/local. So it's been really an honor to be here today. We hope to stay connected and that you stay connected with AARP. We have many different ways you connect with us, but we're so grateful that you had us here, Elizabeth. And so we thank Schneps and also the Attorney General's Office for being on with us today.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure. What a critical piece of information for everyone. There's a lot of information in the chat. I will also be sharing a lot of this information in the email that goes out to you tomorrow. So you'll have that as well. You'll also get a recording of this fantastic webinar so that we can be able to address any of your questions, or you can share it with people and you can take things down. But we want you to use these resources. I'm so grateful to AARP New York. So grateful to Jessica for being here, for Kat. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate everyone being here. I do want to touch on a couple of questions that we do have in the chat. We have a few minutes where we can reach them. I know there's a lot of questions, and Kat, you've given us a lot of resources. So where someone wants to know, where can we send questionable emails? And forwarding an email, does it put us in danger compared to clicking on it by mistake? You know, we've all heard you can't click on something, but what about forwarding it? Is that important to the authorities and you know, asking for help from family members also? Will that put them in danger?
I would say, and Kat, you may have an answer on this as well. I just want to say that, you know, the Attorney General's Office also does have some resources and information. We have a booklet called Smart Seniors. It's a book you can access online, or you can just have a copy mailed to you. And it has a lot of the websites that we talked about, a lot of the phone numbers we talked about, and some information about the different types of scams that are out there. So I'm just going to quickly give our number. I know it'll be in the email that you all get, but the number at the Attorney General's Office is 800-771-7755. You can call that number. You can get a copy of Smart Seniors, but you can also ask exactly that question. Because I wouldn't want to tell you it's okay to forward this or you shouldn't forward that. I think the best thing is to call the hotline number and tell someone what the exact email is that you got. And if it's okay to forward it, maybe you want to just cut and paste the address. But I think that depending on what the email is, the person on the hotline will give you the best information about what to do with that email. Just as an aside, if you'd rather go online than make a phone call, the Attorney General's Office is ag.ny.gov. And that's our website. And there's a place you can file a complaint or ask for a publication or get information. So just additional resources to put out there. But I would say that in terms of an email, you should talk to the person at the hotline or file, and if you do it online, file a complaint and tell them what the email is, and they will advise you.
Yeah,
Great,
thank you. I wanted to answer a couple other people's who typed questions in if we have time, Elizabeth.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so someone was asking, what about white collar crimes? I know that the SEC tries to track and resolve crimes like that. So one place to report, I know, is you can go to sec.gov, and they also have an 800 number where you can call and get information about how to report those kinds of crimes that involve, investment scams and schemes. Also, someone asked about how to verify. So yes, especially when it's through email, one important thing to look for in an email address is, and we just had this happen to us, someone in an aging network forwarded a scam email on to the whole aging network and thought it was from AARP. But the AARP, like Jessica said, look for a letter that might be wrong, that doesn't make sense, like AARP1.org or something. You can also, sometimes people try to look legitimate in the URL or their email address by putting AARP before the @ sign, or by putting whatever name they're trying to spoof or impersonate before the @ sign. And then the domain is just some other regular domain. So it looks legitimate because it's got the business name or the person's name in there somewhere, but it's not really in the actual domain, which AARP owns, which is aarp.org. So that's one way to look. And also, of course, always be on guard for spelling mistakes and errors, which is common with some of these things that originate from other countries.
There's a question here which I thought was interesting, was, when Gmail asked to save your password, they wanted to know, is that safe? When you change your password and you update it, and Google has that password saving, I don't know that it's protecting. Is that safe?
Well, of course, if anyone sits down at your computer, then you're not safe. Or if they decide to use any device that you have, and as long as they have your device, if they can get in that way, it can be less safe for sure. So that's something to consider. Jessica, do you have anything on that?
Yeah, we encourage people to not use that feature, to not save your password. Write it down. As Kat said, don't keep it, taped to your computer, but write it down somewhere, put it somewhere safe, in a book or something. But we encourage people not to save the password because people can access it. Scammers can access it once you've saved it online.
Thank you for that. We have another question about dealing with credit reporting agencies. Someone was saying that sometimes their information data gets hacked. So is that trustworthy? I think people feel they think they can go somewhere to be trusted, and then that gets hacked. So what would you say to someone who's concerned about the credit reporting agencies and the safety of them?
Well, as long as you're making sure that you're actually in communication with the actual credit reporting agencies that we've mentioned, I think there's a higher degree of security there. But Jessica, what can you say about that?
Yes, I mean, if you're on the legitimate website, you use it. And now that's not to say that legitimate sites don't get hacked. And in fact, in our office, we are frequently having lawsuits and settlements with companies. It could be a perfectly legitimate company, but they didn't have enough security. They got hacked. People's information was compromised. And we get settlements and sometimes can, reimburse customers, or at least get them to, upgrade their security protocols. But yes, it's true. Any website can get hacked. But if you know that you're on the correct site for a credit agency or for any agency, you're much less likely to have any danger to your personal information.
And I also put the website reportfraud.ftc.org and the do-not-call.gov. And I think, to make that distinction, you can be on the do-not-call list, but that doesn't mean that all your calls are safe, nor does it mean you won't get any calls, right?
Exactly. The do not call registry is great in sort of stopping some of the legitimate sales calls. But first of all, illegitimate folks may still use your number. Also, being on the call list means that does not prevent you from getting political calls or charitable requests. So you will, even on the do not call list, you could still get those calls.
Right, so that does not make you safe. Do not feel that you are safe because you are on the do not call list. This is fantastic. Thank you. So we could literally be here all day long answering questions because there's so much there, but I think really feel confident, Kat and Jessica, that you've given our viewers such important information and valuable resources to follow up with, to check out scams, to report scams, to get support if you've been scammed, all critical pieces of protecting yourself and your loved ones. So I thank you so much. I want to thank all of our attendees for spending this important time with us. As I shared, we'll be emailing you the link to the recording. We will be emailing you this contact information, very valuable information that Jessica and Kat gave you as well. And you can always reach out to us for additional questions. But thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, AARP New York. And thank you to our attendees. Please, everyone, stay safe, stay healthy, and I look forward to seeing you on a future webinar.
Thank
Bye,
you
everyone.
as well.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.